you graduated in 2001, right? Based on the email that
Yes.
you sent me.
Yeah, I graduated from college in 2001 from, I don't know if you want to know the name of the school or not, but Tuskegee University.
Okay,
And so after that, after graduating from Tuskegee, I ended up getting a job in the power industry,
nice.
working for a very large company. I think everybody knows GE.
Okay, nice. Yeah,
I went around and really around the US, as well as I did some travel overseas and started up power plants.
nice.
And so that's kind
That's
of,
pretty good.
yeah, so that's pretty much what my journey has been. Then now I'm working for a local utility here in
Right.
town.
Yeah,
So
once you get that experience, field experience, and working on different projects, even different geographical locations. Like my background is from consulting. I've spent a fair bit
okay.
of time doing consultancy, and you get to travel a lot. So if you're on site, if you're on
Mm.
field doing the work, you actually learn a lot more,
Oh,
right?
I agree. Yes.
You get to encounter problems which you have to solve right then and there, which
Right.
is pretty challenging.
Hmm.
Um, and when you're young, I guess traveling is also fun.
Yes.
But then after a time, after a time living out of briefcases in hotels
Yeah, it gets a little
and
old.
yeah, it gets boring after time.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
did it for 5 years, so but that was
yeah,
about the max for me.
yeah, I was in consultancy for about 7 years.
Okay.
So yeah, but you get to see the world.
Yeah.
That's a fun part as well. Um, so being out of school for almost 20 years, that's quite a bit of time, right?
Yeah.
Like I have students who have been out of school for a longer period of time as
Uh-huh.
well, but yeah, it is quite an achievement.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had taken this exam 3 times in the past, right?
That's
Which
correct.
years did you take it?
I took it in 15, and then I took it twice, I think. No, yeah, in 17, and then I think also 18, from what I remember. And then, of
Okay,
course,
all
um,
CBT
yeah,
basically, right?
yeah,
All the computer based because the CBT came about in 2014, if I remember correctly. Yep.
yes.
So all CBT.
Took the first test, and it kind of gave me a good idea which areas I need to work on. And then so tried again in 17, thinking that I was going to do better. And I said, okay, well, I got to find a way to uh, make sure that I'm successful in this whole thing. So that's when I found your book.
Right.
I said, I got to change my plan. And so I went with your book. It was really good material.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I think at the end of the day, I had a plan, but I don't think it was a solid plan as much as I would say, as solid as the plan that I put together this last time that helped me.
Right.
I looked at really, I think, and a lot of people do this sometimes because I've talked to many people, and they have to say, well, I'm going to study just enough to I feel like I'm comfortable, but I study like I want to ace this thing at
Right.
the end of the day. And so that's what I did when I prepared for it. I used your material, meaning your new book, the
The third
practice.
edition of the study guide. Yeah.
Yep, the third
July
edition.
2020. Yeah.
Yep, as well as the new updated version of the NECC version.
NCES. Yeah.
Excuse me, NCE.
NCEES.
Yeah,
Right.
and so doing that, and also going through your going back and looking at your kind of look at it with more like an informational session that you put on a while back to kind of say, hey, put a calendar together
Yeah.
and follow that calendar, and then go back after, I think it's after 30 days or so, and continue on that particular path. And then of course I use some of the components from your test taking strategies.
Right.
Uh,
And
so
you also followed the online course as well,
yes,
right?
that was a
Here.
huge preparation for me. And I don't know how much detail you want me to go into it, but I can go into a whole lot of detail to tell you
Yeah.
what.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we can touch base up on all of those resources, but I guess one of the biggest challenges you would agree for somebody who's working full time like yourself
Yes.
is that motivation piece. Okay, that is important in my
Yeah.
opinion,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? Uh, you are at a point in your career where you can probably see the value of how it's going to add up, right, and
Yes.
how it's going to
Okay.
benefit, right?
Right.
But every failed attempt, in my opinion, that I've seen students, um, it basically leaves a scar. All right.
Yeah.
And
Oh
that's
yeah.
why when you go to the NCS website and look at the passing rates for people who are taking it second time,
Right.
um, it's very low, right? You always have a better chance of passing it in the first attempt, right? But that
Yeah.
first attempt, exactly as you said, you don't necessarily just need to prepare enough to pass the exam, because chances are you might fall short, right?
Right.
Um, Going in with like no stones unturned, with playing to win attitude and giving it your
Right.
best shot, I think even if you're a little bit over prepared, it is the winning strategy, right?
I agree 100%.
And keeping that motive. This in your recent attempt in which you passed the
Mhm.
exam, how long did you prepare for a flea?
I
When did
did
you
actually.
when did you seriously start studying for the exam?
Seriously started, I would say more so after October. And I'll tell you the reason why. Like I said, I work in the power industry.
Right.
And between really starting, I would say more like June through October, we have a lot of storms that come here. I'm in Florida, by the way.
Yep. Hmm.
And so there's a lot of storm support you have to actually be involved in. And I'm
Right.
actually a manager, I'm a director. So
Nice.
that's another compounding
Yeah.
opportunity that I have. I have employees that I have to manage. So
Right.
I can't really just put my employees aside and say, hey,
Yep.
let me go ahead and study. So I
Right.
had to try to find time, my personal time, late at night,
Yeah.
lunchtime, and things like
Yeah.
that to try to study. But so I ended up taking about 4 months or so, and then including over the holidays, and really
Right.
got the support of my wife. And she said, "Hey, do what you need to do to go ahead and pass it." She said, "I
Yeah.
want you to pass it this time."
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that buy-in is very important. I have students who tell me that they basically use their vacation time,
Yes.
okay, 2 weeks
Yep.
out of their vacation time just to study. And obviously, if your family is not on board and they feel like you're wasting time,
Yeah.
right, then it's not gonna fly, right?
Yeah.
And again, it becomes all the more difficult when you are in that multiple attempt scenario, right?
Yes.
Because you have that extra pressure that you could be spending that time with your family, taking them somewhere. Well, right now it's very difficult to go anywhere,
Oh yeah.
but it almost feels like you have that additional burden on your shoulders, that you're not only using your time, you're actually making them sacrifice as well.
Yes. And my wife told me that she felt like she was taking a test.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
agree. I think it's definitely whenever you take on whether it's the FE, I keep also hearing certain feedback that when you take the PE, it's almost like your family's taking the test, right? The amount of time
Yeah,
that
for
you
sure.
go through it. So
I tell my students that in my personal opinion, PE exam is probably more difficult as compared to FE exam.
right.
But PE is in many ways a lot more fun to prepare for. The reason being, um, it is more focused, more specialized. So
Yeah.
somebody like
Right.
yourself who's already working in the power industry, you're going to be taking PE power exam, right?
Right. Correct.
And it will be a very good refresher for
Mhm.
you to go through symmetrical components, per unit analysis, fault analysis, protection
Right.
and control. Even if you're an expert in a certain field within power systems, right, you would agree with me most likely that it is such a huge field
I
that
agree.
every once in a while it's a good idea if you can get a chance to basically brush up. So this is a
Right.
forced opportunity basically. You're
Oh,
being
I agree.
forced to basically go through all the power systems engineering,
Right.
at least at a high level to some extent, which is a great opportunity during our once we enter in the workforce. Once you start working as an engineer, like you go from project to project. Every now and then you might get exposed to something which is a little bit more complicated, and you might need to do a little bit
Yes.
of studying. But you really never get an opportunity, unless you're in academics or something, to
Mhm.
really sit down um, and basically go back to the basics, right?
Right. Right.
Once you become a PE, hopefully very soon, there is actually a continuing education component which sort of incentivizes. It's a
Right.
requirement actually to keep your license, to do some courses and to basically go through that process. And they have
Mhm.
a certain hours component to it. But yeah, it will be a lot more fun. So although it's going to be more difficult, right?
Oh yeah.
Now, in terms of the exam preparation resources,
Mhm.
which it let's talk about the online course. A lot of my students actually don't know about the online course yet. My books are much more well known on Amazon, but I recently, I would say late last year, sorry, late 2019, early 2020 is when
Mhm.
I really revamped the course, right? Uh, because a lot of students are able to pass the exam just by using the study guide, which is great. Study guide is focused on problem-based learning, right? You
Mhm.
basically, at the end of the day, those 110 questions are gonna decide whether you pass or fail, right? And
Yes.
solve, right? It's and solving them is
Yeah.
the ultimate goal, right? So problem-based learning is very important. I think you would agree as well. Back in 2011 or late 1990s, when you went through your education, I know a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my friends going through engineering school, myself included. Uh, there is that element in engineers. I think by default we are designed um, to learn through problem solving, right? Sometimes
Yes.
even when a professor is giving you a lecture, your mind is always like, okay, what type of question can be asked, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right, so you're always
All good.
fixated on that, like, okay, I'm learning about MOSFETs. Tell me how they're going to ask me a question on MOSFETs, because
Yeah.
that's what I'm interested. Sometimes it's like reverse
Right.
engineering, right? You learn by doing.
Yes.
So so yeah, as a study guide, a lot of students really like it. In fact, pretty much all the students that even use the online course, they do
Hmm.
use the study guide. But then for someone who's been out of school for a long time, or somebody who wants to go back to the basics, or somebody who wants that structure, step-by-step
Right.
process, that's where I basically brought about this on-demand course. So if you could
Yeah.
talk talk about the on-demand course and how it helped you, that would be great.
Absolutely. So I think that one of the main benefits of the online course, as far as what helped me, I felt like that definitely as an well. Let me just step back and say this. One of the things I noticed after going through the practice exam from the uh, test developer, uh, I started looking at it in a different way. I said, well, I'm an engineer. I graduated from college, got a degree. They know I can work problems, but do you really understand the concepts?
Yeah,
Do you
that's
understand the
important.
theory?
Yeah.
And so after looking at your book as well as the course, I noticed that you would definitely, on every module, you would say, okay, this is how this works. But the engineer came in me and said, I just want to know how to calculate the problem.
Yeah.
But I had to make myself sit there and listen.
Yeah.
The videos were definitely not too long. So I want to give you feedback that it was just the right time,
Yeah.
right amount of time. But I had to sit there and say, okay, listen to the video and make sure no matter what you're doing, go back and start working problems on that particular chapter. And I think that's really what helped me. And I remember you sent me an email. I guess you can kind of see the progress. It says it's like you're going along pretty good. You make sure that you are going in here and working problems. And I
Right.
think what I was trying to do, which I think what got me the first time or the previous test, I was trying to go through all the modules and then come
Right.
back and work the problems. But I think it actually ended up sticking as far as the concept and also the theory. And I can give you some other information as far as the other questions that come up as far as how it really helped me on the test too. So, but I think
Sure.
definitely those were the two components, really making sure I understood the theory
Yeah.
and which is really the concept.
There's a book that I read, I think about a couple of years ago. It's a bestseller,
Mm-hmm.
By Daniel Kahneman, and there was another
Mm-hmm.
author. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, right? Or Thinking Fast
Yes.
and Thinking Slow, something like that. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
So he
No, I
basically
haven't. I'll make sure I
he's
remember that.
yeah, he's a Nobel laureate, right? So he won
Okay.
a Nobel Prize, and essentially
Mm-hmm.
the gist of it is that there are two ways of thinking. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the title: thinking fast and thinking slow, right? So he calls that we have a system one, and we have a system which is called system two. So not everything, our mind is not designed to process everything or learn everything from scratch all the time, right?
Right.
We cannot start learning everything from first principles. Some of the
Right.
things like it just comes naturally, and for some of the things we just need to make very quick decisions. If we start using our mental capacity to really dig deeper into every single thing, we may not get anything done, right?
Right.
So, but recognizing where you have to slow down and where
Yep.
you have to speed up, that is a key. That is a key to effective time management. That is the key to effective decision making, right? That is a key in many ways to living a successful life, right?
I agree. Yes.
There's another very smart guy, Peter Lynch,
I heard of him.
and
Yeah.
so yeah, he's regarded as one of the best investors of all time.
Yep.
So for about 14-15 years, I think he maintained annual rate of return of about 29.3%, right?
Hmm.
And he took a small investment fund, from 14 million to 14 billion dollars, right?
Wow.
So a really really smart investor, and then he decided to basically quit quite early in his late 40s.
I
And
would too.
yeah, he had many reasons, right? He does
Right.
a
Right.
lot of philanthropy, he does a lot of social work.
Right.
So yeah, so very smart guy. So he says that when somebody is planning to buy, let's say not even a car, but let's say if you're planning to buy your wedding suit, or you're planning to buy, a piece of furniture for your bedroom, or
Yeah.
or a new TV, or even a laptop, or even a cell phone, people go to great extent to basically research, look at the
Yes.
competitors, look at, what are the different specifications. But when it comes to investing, right, you hear somebody on a bus stop give you a tip about a one hot stock, and you're gonna
Right.
put like $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever extra cash you have, right?
Right.
Without even thinking, you just look at that as a ticker symbol, right? So
Right.
that's where you have to slow down, right? That's where you have to do your research.
Right.
But our mind has certain. So you basically, coming back to your point, you realize that, okay, if I really want to crack this, I want
Yeah.
to be able to dig deeper, and
Exactly.
take time. Although the temptation is always to, sometimes fool yourself into thinking that I already know this concept, right? Or I get a hang of it, right?
Right. Well, I
So
had a process in place for that to prevent that from me, to actually prevent me from thinking that.
okay,
Because you're right,
you
I
mind
did have
sharing?
that. Yeah. So what I did for each of the sections, that included math, right?
Yeah.
Um, I had a process of saying, okay, whenever you explain a step on how to solve a problem, well, I try to make sure I put it in as far as a process in my mind. How am I going to work this problem?
Okay.
Any type of problem, and
Right.
really understanding the concept, right? So I'm going through the process. Okay, I understand how this works. But if I can't go back and actually solve that problem, it can be 2 weeks. I should be able to go back and at least solve the problem after 2 weeks, or
Right.
figure it out,
That's
sit there
that's
for a minute and
pretty
think
good.
about it. And so I said, well, if I got a good process in place and I understand what's going on, then I know it. And if I found an area that I didn't know, for example, you take controls,
Yeah.
um, the light bulbs finally went off on some of those block diagrams. I said, "Oh,
Right.
this makes plenty of sense." And
Right.
and really, the way you explained it on your video made a whole lot of sense, because we all go to YouTube, right?
Right. Yeah.
I was going to YouTube, find different material, and that some of those methods were, if you memorize it, yeah, you'd be good. But I really want to understand, or really get a good grasp on, what does it really mean when as far as forward feedback, negative feedback, how
Right.
does that really work? And then of course, how do you handle um, the summing junctions and things of that nature. So once I
Right.
understood that concept, and if I had to go back after 2 weeks, whether it was work related or whatever it may be, I can go back in there and say, okay, well, let me make sure I really understand this. And that's what really got me to the point, okay, I feel comfortable now in the next subject.
Yeah. And doing that after a full day work, right? And
Oh
doing
yeah.
that over the weekends and over the holidays, when you could simply just shut up the laptop, close the books, watch
Yes.
something on Netflix, or you're in Florida, so the weather is 360 days sunny, right?
Right.
So do something a lot more interesting, something a lot more
Right.
instantly gratifying with your time, right? So that's, I think that's where perseverance comes into play, and that's where the mindset really comes into play, right?
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you attended my webinar or the planner that you have. I talk about perseverance. It's
Yeah.
super important, right? Otherwise, like, uh, there's no way, because you're already employed, you're gainfully
Yeah.
employed. In your case, you are at a very good position as well, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's something that has to go somewhere in between our ears over here,
Yeah.
that should motivate you, and being able to sustain that level of motivation is really important, right? Because
Yeah.
this is not a 1 week game, this is not a 2 week game,
It's
right?
a long-term deal.
It's a
Yeah.
3 to 4 months if you are really really focused, putting in 20 hours, 15 to 20 hours a week,
Right.
right? But life happens,
Oh
right?
yeah.
In between, you have work, you have personal commitments, you have
Hmm.
other things happening well, right now a lot of stuff is happening all around us.
Right.
So to keep your focus, it's very challenging. uh, what about the study guide? The course helped you with the theory, but how did you effectively use the study guide, the third edition of the study guide?
Um, I think one of the things that really helped me on the third edition, I know, like you said before, the second edition, right? You had some of the same stuff in there as far as the control problems, but you changed up like the computer portion.
Yeah,
That
that's where most of the significant changes happen.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was a huge deal, and I think really going through that really helped me understand, uh, you know, the the nuts and bolts of the IT portion of it.
Yeah.
What were they actually asking for in the syllabus? So that portion
Yeah.
helped. I think there were some other areas that you included some new information in as well. I don't remember it all 100%, but
Yeah. It's
um,
always a guessing game because there's so
yeah,
much depth that you can go into in most of pretty much every topic, right?
yeah,
But if you reference handbook, you'll basically see that they have a lot of content on computer networks. The
right,
challenge is that they're only 4 to 6 questions, right? So
yeah,
it's a lot of work for just a small number of questions. But yeah, in the course, like for the computer network section, there are about, I think, 20 lectures, right?
hmm,
Even when I look at it, I say that, okay, if I have to go through these 20 lectures, and most of the content for a power systems engineer like you and me, it is something that if you took a computer networks course back in the day, that was the extent of the exposure for the most part.
right,
Yeah, I mean, when you're installing transformers, and now they're all different types of communications between the switch
hmm,
gears, MCCs, intelligent MCCs, intelligent switch gears, this and that. So
right,
you do get a little bit of Profibus and Profinet, all of that stuff, right?
right.
But for the most part, it's not our forte, right? So but again, I think credit goes back to you for realizing that, okay, even if it's 1 or 2 questions, right? um, it still needs to be done. I don't want
Yes,
to leave anything on the table, because that
yes,
might come and bite you and result in a failure, right? Cannot take any
oh,
chances.
I agree, and yeah,
And in terms of the computer portion, my personal opinion is that, you know what, even if you're a power systems engineer, you're never going
yeah,
to work on a software algorithm, right? You're not going to ever design a network architecture,
right,
right? It's just something that, look at it as an opportunity to see that what other people do, right? And you
yes,
never know what piece of information or what perspective you might gain from it, right?
yeah,
And it's just intellectually stimulating, right?
yes,
I
I
think if
agree.
you go through the lectures, I mentioned it in the lectures about encryption. Okay,
Yep.
that whole concept of encryption, it was just mind blowing for
Hmm.
me. How you basically make use of property of the large prime numbers, okay,
Yep.
and our entire communication system is based on that. Okay,
Yes.
because you cannot, strictly speaking, your assumption is always that the network is insecure. Okay,
Yeah.
for example, we are having this call. The idea is that somebody could be putting devices, maybe at your router, at my router, or somewhere in between, and they might be able to penetrate the network. Let's say that they've
Yes.
penetrated the network. But if the communication is encrypted, even if they get to see the bits and the bytes and zeros and ones flowing, and they're able to
Right.
see all of that, the idea is that if it's encrypted, it is secure. Only you and me would be able to decrypt it, right? which
Right.
is
Right.
which is just amazing, right? So there are a lot of movies that are made on it, right? World War II movies, Enigma. What was it? Game Theory. No, I'm forgetting. Oh, Beautiful Mind, right?
Yes.
That was like almost pointing or alluding that the entire war was won and lost
Right.
by being able to decode, which is
Yes.
which is very true.
Yeah.
Back in the day, as well, they used to have very archaic methods of communication, right? So if you are able
Right.
to give coordinates of something somewhere, then maybe the entire game is off before it even
Right.
started, right?
Right.
So it is very critical. It is very critical. So that's the approach I took. I mean, it was, I'll be honest, it was not a lot of fun creating
Right.
those lectures because a lot of times I had to relearn those things, but it was mentally very stimulating.
No, you did a great job. I mean, I was like blown away how much detail you put behind it. I was like, wow.
Yeah, my assumption was, to be honest, Rico, my assumption was that, okay, when it comes to computer networks, students have very little knowledge base, right?
Yes.
Because I assume that 70 to 80 or maybe up to 90% of the students who are taking FE electrical and computer are power
Mhm.
systems engineer, right?
Right.
So I could have glossed over the surface, right? But the real value, and I do that in some of the lectures where I feel like if the topic is very very there's no point in beating a dead horse, right?
Right.
Because if it's such a common knowledge, there's no point in even revisiting it, right?
Right.
It's just
Right.
assume that you know it, right? And then move forward, because there are 17 sections to cover. There are about, I don't know, 100 plus topics to cover, right? But if it is something which is very convoluted, which is not commonly used, right? Then I think that if you're buying the course, that's why you're buying the course. That's why you're
Yeah.
investing, because you want help with those topics, not with the ones that everybody else can explain, or not
Right.
with those that you already know, maybe, right? It's a
I get
fine balancing act, and I'm always trying to find that perfect balance. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. Um, Practice exam number one, you also mentioned.
Yes.
It's a little bit outdated, but a lot of students still use it, and I think 90% of it is probably still applicable. And the NCS sample exam, obviously, right?
Yeah. So the um, the sample exam I used, and I used your practice exam number one. The reason why I used both, I was actually running out of practice problems because you mentioned early on, usually students take a week off of work for vacation.
More
For
than 1 week. Yeah,
yeah, one
more than
week.
1 week.
I usually do a week kind of
Okay.
prior to the exam.
Okay.
And then, of course, I was already studying over the weekends as well. So I ended up taking at least, I think it was a week, really probably like a week and a half, because I ended up starting that Thursday
Right.
before. And so I ended up taking off that block of time. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to work problems during this amount of time. And then probably like the last 3 days, I go back through the practice exam. So I use
Right.
your practice exam as well as the sample exam as well. And I think that's what really helped me, because I had a variety of problems that I could
Yeah.
work. And then on top of that, it kind of gave me the confidence in saying, okay, I really understand what's going on here. No matter what problem you throw at me,
Right.
I'm going to figure it out. So
That's great. I generally advise giving yourself a little bit more than a week for the practice exam, because I think your preparation level was pretty good. So you could have zoned in to the areas of weaknesses, and within a week or so that you had, or a few
right,
days, you could have, fine-tuned your preparation last minute. But generally speaking, I advise at least 2 weeks, so
yeah,
that if there's anything major that you identify, okay, if let's say on both NCS sample exam or the practice exam one or practice
right,
exam two or the computer simulated practice exam, any resource that you're using, you find that you're not able to get, let's say, a KVL done, or a
right,
Thomelen theorem done, right? Or a
yeah,
Bayes theorem done, then those are major red flags, because those are like
right,
pillars of respective sections, right?
right,
I hope that doesn't happen, but even if it does, then you're prepared for all scenarios, right? Then you can
yes.
go back, because sometimes what happens is that sequentially going through math, probability, ethics, engineering, economics, by the time you get to software, you start forgetting what you did in math, and so
Oh,
on and so
yes,
forth,
that's
right?
true.
So it is not it is not unusual to feel that all of a sudden you're starting to forget that, and that's where the practice exams come into play.
Yes.
And uh, um, Going forward, how do you think your FE is going to help you?
I think right now, the FE really was sort of like my first step of confidence that I can definitely get the PE now.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, after uh, taking approximately 4 to 5 years getting the FE, there were some times, I'll be honest with you, I was like, man, am I ever gonna get this thing done?
Yeah.
But I think a couple of things that really boosted my confidence is, number one, I felt really comfortable going in and test, even when you go check into the test center.
Yeah.
And previous times I had those butterflies,
Yeah.
and I was just sitting over there in the chair, like I felt like I wanted to just go to sleep. And like, okay, can we just get this over with, right?
Yeah.
And I remember them taking a picture of me, because they got to take the picture to kind of show your justification of taking the test
Oh,
or your
really?
comfort.
Okay. Hmm.
I looked pretty relaxed on that picture. I said,
I
well, I'm
see. I
looking
see.
at all these different signs of like, I think I got this time.
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, one of the things that really did it for me, as far as the confidence knowing that I can get the PE, is that um, I really understood, like I said early on, what this test is really asking you. And I think just it may be some advice for other engineers that's taking this test, but I think the test taker or the test maker knows that you can solve the problem. You can do a math problem,
Right.
or uh, calculate anything. You
Yeah.
would never got your degree.
Multiply and divide.
But
Yeah.
yeah, but we want to understand. We want to know if you really understand what you're doing. I
Yeah.
mean, and I think that's what really kind of brought it home for me. So it actually changed my whole way of studying.
Yeah.
Number one, going forward with the PE.
Yeah. It's a difficult exam. It's not an easy exam. Whoever says otherwise has either,
Yeah,
you know, put in a lot of time preparing for it, which is fine if you have time and if you're aiming for perfection,
yeah,
that's perfectly fine. But it will require a lot of time and effort, right? But with most of the
yes,
students, they have a lot of time constraint, right? Like you're still working full time, having a family,
yes. Okay,
friends, and just having a life, right? Um,
right.
I would say it's always easier for students who take it right out of school, but I think the catch 22 or the paradox is that students who just graduate, very few of them realize the importance of FE until
Yeah,
they enter the workforce. Now,
yeah,
I have noticed a lot of students are starting to take that fee more proactively because a lot of job postings, especially in the power systems
yeah,
industry, they mention EIT required or preferred sometimes, right? So there is
yeah,
that um, early, um, messaging from the employers.
right,
So that is helping. But in many cases, still, it's generally after 5 years of experience where you basically are looking for that promotion or looking for that
right,
raise, and you realize, oh, I don't have a PE yet, right?
right, right.
Or
And
yeah,
go. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I was
No, no, go ahead.
gonna just to definitely answer your question there. I think at the end of the day, Um, the FE definitely will help me in the future, meaning, like I said, getting the PE.
Mhm.
But really, the PE is going to be the major thing,
Of
because I
course.
know I can already foresee some of the changes in the industry, the power industry,
Yeah,
to actually apply or to be able to hold certain management and probably vice president jobs. They're going to
yeah,
really want you to have the PE. So,
yeah.
so I'm definitely seeing that benefit.
That's great. All right. Thanks a lot for your time, Rico. I really